Hi everyone, welcome to this channel. Today, we're going to dive deep into something that's often puzzling but rarely explained in detail. Have you ever felt like you're being watched, even when you're alone? In this episode, we're going to uncover one of the creepiest stories you've never heard before. Eleanor Wade had never been one to believe in folklore. As a final-year archaeology student in London, she relied on facts, maps, and field notes. But that changed when she stumbled upon an old manuscript tucked between two dusty geography books in the university's forgotten corner of the library. The document was handwritten, unmarked by an author, and filled with unsettling entries about a remote village called Wychmere in Norfolk. At the heart of it all was a massive tree known as the dagger oak, linked to a pattern of disappearances. The entries shared one chilling detail: every missing person was an outsider, and each incident occurred 13 years apart. One name stood out: Dr. Sylvia Raines, a folklore researcher who vanished in 1997. The most recent entry involved a delivery driver who disappeared in 2010. The current year was 2023. Exactly 13 years later. What drew Eleanor deeper was not just the tales of vanishing strangers, but the abrupt end of the journal. The last entry mentioned the author's plan to visit Wychmere, followed by a torn page and nothing more. As if the writer had simply ceased to exist. Obsession bloomed in Eleanor's mind. She began marking out routes using physical maps, because digital tools couldn't locate the village. She combed through old newspapers and public records to match names and timelines. The pieces fit together too perfectly to be coincidence. As the rain tapped against her apartment window, one thing became clear: this was more than myth. Something had been hidden for decades, and Eleanor intended to uncover it, even if it meant walking into the very heart of darkness. The journey to Wychmere was unlike any Eleanor had taken. After a train dropped her off at the small town of Eerily, she rented a car and followed directions pulled from books too old for barcodes. As she moved deeper into the countryside, the roads narrowed into muddy tracks. Her phone lost signal several miles from the village, and the map app froze with a blank screen. The isolation became palpable. Wychmere appeared suddenly, shrouded in morning mist. It looked untouched by time. Stone cottages, thick with moss, stood in tight rows. No modern shops. No overhead wires. Only dim oil lamps hung along the lane and towering trees shadowing narrow paths. The air hung heavy, like the whole village was holding its breath. Eleanor noticed the villagers' stares. They didn't greet her. Some turned away. One child was pulled back by his mother as Eleanor passed. Not curiosity. Wariness. She checked into a small stone cottage on the edge of the village, rented from an older man known locally as Mr. Thornwell. Though the cottage was clean and quaint, it felt like something was watching from inside the walls, not hostile, just waiting. That night, the silence was overwhelming. No city hum, no distant roads. Only the rustle of leaves, the creak of ancient wood, and the faint sound of something scratching in the distance, not from below, but from above. The cottage stood right at the boundary between Wychmere and a patch of dense woods called Ash Hollow. Towering at its edge was a gnarled, blackened tree that stood apart from the rest. Its bark was split and scorched like old wounds, its branches crooked and unnaturally long. This was the dagger oak. Mr. Thornwell, the man who owned the property, looked more like a gravekeeper than a landlord. He said little, but his eyes held a depth that made it clear he was always watching. When Eleanor mentioned her interest in the tree's history, something in his face tightened. He gave her the key and offered one simple warning: stay indoors after sunset. Inside the cottage, faded black and white photographs lined the walls. Some showed the village in earlier days, others depicted strange rituals. One photo showed people gathered around the dagger oak holding torches. Another captured a young girl with pitch-black eyes staring directly into the lens. None of the frames had names or dates. Mr. Thornwell didn't live on site. He stayed in another house a few streets away. Before leaving, he lingered on the doorstep, seemingly about to speak, but he said nothing and slowly turned away, his footsteps dragging like someone carrying the weight of things unsaid. Eleanor began to sense a pattern. The villagers all knew something. But they weren't telling. And silence was Wychmere's loudest language. Night came fast in Wychmere. Fog rolled down from the forest, curling through the lanes and cloaking rooftops like a shroud. Eleanor tried to sleep, but her thoughts lingered on the shape of that tree. The dagger oak loomed in her mind, its branches stretched like limbs searching in the dark. Around 2 a.m, she awoke to a soft sound on the roof. Not rain. Not wind. It was a slow, scratching rhythm, deliberate and patterned. Her skin prickled with fear. The sound paused, then resumed, this time faster. As if claws were raking the shingles. She crept to the window and shone her flashlight outside. The wind had calmed, yet the tree's branches shifted unnaturally, as if responding to her light. There were no birds. No owls. No rustle of animals. Then she saw it, fresh gouges along the edge of the roof, near where the tree limbs hung. Deep, clean claw marks. She closed the window quietly. Her heart thumped loud in her chest. Something was above her. Not animal. Not human. Something that had waited for darkness, and climbed down. The next day, Eleanor decided to examine the dagger oak more closely. She waited until the villagers were preoccupied, perhaps at church, and approached the tree with her camera, notebook, and a small compass. From a distance, it had seemed large. Up close, it was colossal. Its roots bulged from the earth like old bones. She ran her fingers along its bark. Cold. Slick. Then, hidden in the dirt between roots, she found a carved symbol, a circle with 5 jagged lines inside. The same symbol had appeared in the manuscript from the library. She hurried to sketch it. But then, the wind shifted violently. Leaves tore through the air, and a sharp scent filled her nose, damp soil mixed with the stench of rotting flesh. Looking down, she noticed something buried beneath the roots. A scrap of white cloth, and a pale fingertip pushing through the earth. A human finger. Fresh. She stumbled back, nausea rising. But then came a sound behind her, faint breathing. Not from the ground. From above. She didn't turn around. She ran, feet slipping on wet earth, heart racing as the forest seemed to pulse behind her. Eleanor locked herself inside the cottage, shaken by the discovery beneath the dagger oak. She tried to rationalize what she had seen, maybe it was a discarded mannequin part, maybe the roots were disturbed by animals. But her hands kept shaking, and her stomach refused food. Something deep within her knew it was human. And it had been recent. To calm herself, she revisited the wall of old photographs. One frame in particular had bothered her since the first night, the girl with black eyes. On closer inspection, the image was sharper than the others. Almost modern. But what unsettled her most was the background, it was the dagger oak, unmistakable in its twisted silhouette. She scanned the girl's features. Pale skin, sharp cheekbones, lips parted slightly as if in mid-speech. There was something uncanny about her presence, not sorrowful, but predatory. Her eyes, darker than shadows, stared through the camera as though aware of who might be looking decades later. Then Eleanor noticed a reflection in the photo's glass. A shape, faint and curved, someone behind her. She spun around. No one was there. When she looked back, the photograph had shifted. The girl's head was now turned slightly. Still facing forward, but no longer centered. As if she was reacting to something Eleanor hadn't yet seen. As night approached, Eleanor turned her attention to the case of Dr. Sylvia Raines. She found an archived newspaper article in her notes, one she had printed before leaving London. It described Raines' disappearance during a personal research trip to Norfolk in 1997. Her last known location was Wychmere. Local authorities conducted a cursory investigation but concluded she had simply gotten lost in the woods. No search parties. No follow-ups. The villagers had been uncooperative, and the article quoted the lead officer calling the locals superstitious and evasive. But what stood out most was a small detail. Sylvia had been investigating folklore surrounding tree spirits and dwelling entities. According to the article, her final field note referenced the one who climbs down when watched. The phrase chilled Eleanor to the bone. She began to suspect the villagers hadn't just witnessed disappearances, they had accepted them. As a pattern. As payment. The spacing of 13 years wasn't a coincidence. It was a cycle. And that cycle had begun again. She checked the calendar. The next full moon would be that night. Despite everything, or perhaps because of it, Eleanor felt drawn back to the tree. She waited until sunset, took her flashlight, and slipped out under the cover of twilight. The village was eerily quiet. No lamps were lit. Curtains drawn. Even the dogs had stopped barking. Ash Hollow greeted her like a memory she hadn't made yet. The trees curved inward unnaturally, creating a corridor that felt carved, not grown. She reached the dagger oak just as the moon rose, casting long silver shadows across the earth. The roots had shifted again. Where she had seen the buried cloth, now there was an indentation, a hole, partly collapsed. Within it, she saw more than cloth. Bones. A decayed jaw. A lock of human hair. She backed away, but her foot hit something, a rusted lantern. Picking it up, she saw initials scratched into the base, SR. Sylvia Raines had not gotten lost. She had been taken. Or chosen. As Eleanor stood in shock, the wind died, and the forest became deathly still. Then came the sound again, soft, deliberate. Scratching. But this time, it wasn't on a rooftop. It was behind her. Above her. She turned her flashlight upward. For a second, there was nothing but gnarled bark and curling limbs. Then, her light caught it, a shape clinging to the trunk like a parasite. Not animal. Not entirely human. Its body was elongated, limbs too long, fingers ending in curved, claw-like tips. Skin the color of ash bark. No eyes. Just hollow sockets, leaking black ichor. It didn't move like a creature bound by gravity. It slid, silently, sideways down the trunk, defying natural movement. Eleanor froze. The thing's head tilted toward her, slowly, deliberately, like it was recognizing her. Like it had seen her before. In the photograph. She ran. Branches whipped at her arms and face. The forest blurred into a twisting mess of shadows. Behind her, the sound of scratching grew louder, joined now by faint clicking, not from one mouth, but from many. She burst through the tree lane and into the village lane, panting, bleeding, screaming for help. But the windows remained dark. No one opened a door. The villagers were waiting it out. As they had done before. Eleanor barely made it back to the cottage. She slammed the door, pushed a dresser in front of it, and collapsed onto the floor. Her breath ragged. Her ears ringing. She lay still for a long time, her mind refusing to process what she had seen. When she finally stood, she walked to the bathroom to clean her wounds. But when she turned on the light and faced the mirror, her heart nearly stopped. On her collarbone, just above her heart, a new mark had appeared. Carved into her skin, not fresh, not scabbed, but healed, as if it had always been there. A circle with 5 jagged lines. The same symbol beneath the tree. The same one from the manuscript. She had been marked. She wasn't just researching the entity now. She was part of its cycle. Bound by a curse that had reached across decades, pulling scholars, travelers, and innocents into its roots. And outside, in the dark, the dagger oak whispered. Not with words, but with breath. With the soft, scraping promise that it would climb again, soon. The cottage creaked like an old ship during a storm, though the night outside was eerily calm. Eleanor tried to sleep but was kept awake by the distant sound of scratching again, no longer from the woods or the tree, but from inside the house. At first, she assumed it was rats in the walls. But as the hours passed, the noise shifted upward. Above her bedroom ceiling. Then directly above her bed. The attic. She had never opened it. The hatch was nailed shut. But now, as the scratching grew louder and more erratic, Eleanor could no longer ignore it. She took the fireplace poker and a flashlight and climbed onto a chair to reach the attic door. When she finally pried it open, a rush of cold, musty air hit her like a wave. Dust floated down like ash. She aimed her flashlight into the crawlspace above and nearly dropped it. In the corner of the attic sat dozens of old dolls, arranged in a semicircle. Each was missing their eyes, their faces scorched or stained with a dark fluid. In the center was a small wooden idol, roughly carved, human-shaped, with elongated arms reaching down to the floor. It had no face, but its head tilted in a way that mirrored the creature on the tree. Beside it, she found another photograph, newer than the rest, a black and white picture of herself, standing by the dagger oak. She had never posed for it. Never stood like that. And behind her in the image was a shadow, high above in the tree. She dropped the photo and slammed the attic hatch shut. Whatever was watching her, had been inside long before she arrived. The next morning brought no relief. The sun never quite broke through the clouds. A grey haze hung over Wychmere. The village remained as silent as the grave. Eleanor wandered outside, desperate for human connection. But what she saw disturbed her even more. Villagers were walking slowly, in single file, toward the woods. Their expressions were blank. Lifeless. Eyes unfocused. As if they were in a trance. Even the children moved with solemnity, their small hands clasped together, their lips moving in silent chant. No one acknowledged Eleanor. She called out, but her voice went unheard. They followed the old trail leading to the dagger oak. Not with fear, but reverence. As if returning to a place of worship. Or sacrifice. Eleanor followed from a distance, hiding behind hedges and trees. When the procession reached the tree, they simply stood there, encircling it, arms at their sides. Then the branches began to move. Not from the wind. But with purpose. The villagers raised their heads, and Eleanor watched in horror as their mouths opened, in unison, though no sound came out. Just breath. Cold and synchronized. And above them, the thing stirred. 13, the Book of 13. Back at the cottage, Eleanor searched through the hidden compartment beneath the fireplace, the one place she hadn't checked. There, wrapped in an oilcloth, was a small, brittle book bound in leather, the Book of 13. Inside were entries, each dated exactly 13 years apart, detailing visits to the dagger oak, sightings of the entity, and names, written in trembling hands. Many of the names had been crossed out. At the final entry, dated 13 years prior, the handwriting abruptly changed. It was panicked, rushed. I am last. No one else will come. Let it end with me. The name at the bottom, Sylvia Raines. Eleanor's name wasn't in the book. But as she turned to the last page, something had been written in fresh ink, still glistening. Welcome. She dropped the book and stepped back in horror. There were no pens in the cottage. No fresh ink. And yet the word was written clearly, with purpose. As night fell again, Eleanor prepared to leave. She packed what little she could and decided to run, not to the authorities, not to another village, but simply away. Far from Wychmere, from the dagger oak, from the thing that now marked her. But the moment she stepped out the door, the world had shifted. The village was gone. The lane she had walked down each day now curved into the woods. The path to the main road was swallowed by trees that hadn't been there hours before. The sky, once gray, had turned to a strange violet hue. Time itself had bent. She realized the curse wasn't just a haunting, it was a boundary. A prison stitched with roots and fog. Those who entered became part of its cycle. The village existed in a place just outside reality, where rules bent and time repeated itself like a loop. And now the loop had turned again. Behind her, a branch scraped down the cottage window. She looked up. It was climbing. The next morning, a new photograph appeared on the wall. A picture of Eleanor, eyes hollow, standing by the dagger oak. Her face was pale, unreadable. Not alive, not dead, just present. Frozen in a moment that hadn't yet happened. The villagers resumed their daily routines, as if nothing had occurred. The fog thinned, and sunlight returned. But no one spoke of Eleanor. As if she had never been there. As if she had always been. Beneath the dagger oak, new soil had been disturbed. A small mound now rested where the idol once stood. And from the base of the tree, a new root emerged. It twitched once, like a finger. Then it was still. Somewhere in the attic, the dolls turned their heads toward the hatch. The cycle was complete. But the tree would wait. For another 13 years. For another name. Another watcher. The entity above the tree never left. It merely slept, hanging, waiting to climb again. That was our story for tonight. Do you think it's just an ordinary tale, or is there something more to it? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the next stories. See you, if you still dare to watch next time.